Hey guys and gals, welcome back to another episode of Haunted Gaming. This week I'll be talking about Team Fortress 2, a much requested creepypasta. This creepypasta begins with a player who tells us that they are deathly afraid to play Team Fortress 2 after something had happened to them while playing the game. The player states that it started 3 days ago and the player was enjoying the Halloween event on Team Fortress 2. The player was contacted by his or her friend on Steam. And the player engaged in a conversation with their friend, and the friend had told the player that they encountered some weird stuff happening with their game. And it asked the player to try out a glitch that involved going into the loadout screen and equipping certain weapons in order. The order was to equip the mackerel, and then the bat, then the mackerel again, and finally the Sandman weapon. The player was, however, unable to perform the glitch because he or she lacked the weapons, and told their friend simply that they couldn't do it. And the friend simply said thanks for listening, and even apologized for telling the player the glitch. And then the conversation ended. The player noticed that his or her friend wasn't talking to him or her like normal, and would often type differently in other normal chat sessions. And this time, the way the player's friend was chatting sounded weird. The player went to try to do this glitch after he or she got hold of the necessary items. As the player did this, the game froze for a little bit. The player thought this was unusual since he or she was playing on a very high-end PC, and realized that Team Fortress 2 did have a tendency to lag, however. Before the game unfroze, a loud beeping noise was heard from the earbuds. As the game returned to normal, the player noticed that the loadout slots had disappeared, and it was just a dark gray background with two gray buttons that contained no text. The player saw a scout character staring at him or her as well. The character wasn't holding a weapon and had no pupils. The player believed that this may have just been a graphical glitch. The player pressed the escape key and returned to the main menu, except that this time the main menu was glitched and appeared to be rushed. The title, Team Fortress 2, wasn't in the regular font anymore, and it appeared to be written in Times New Roman. And below it were three options called Play, Options, and Quit. The player noticed that it was kinda late, but still decided to go ahead and play the game. The player loaded up the server browser and noticed that only one server was available, and was shocked since the game was normally able to detect about 2,000 servers. The player checked if there were any filter options, but there weren't. So the player clicked on the only server and noticed that there was just one player on it, and the map name was just called Manor, which is unusual since Team Fortress 2 maps aren't really just one-word names, and are usually given names like what you're seeing on the screen right now. The player connected to the server and was immediately sent to the class selection screen. The player had created an item in the game recently for the Demolitions class, and wanted to try it out. So the player chose the Demolitions character and spawned into the game world. The player was in the middle of the map, however, and had no weapons. The player opened up the scoreboard and noticed that the other player that they saw before they joined the match wasn't there at all, not even on the other team or spectating. And the player did also notice the server's name changed to Get Out. The player typed, "Who are you?" and shortly after his or her character burnt into flames and blew up, leaving an agonizing scream. The player quickly disconnected back to the server browser menu, feeling scared from the encounter. The name of the server changed to "Come Back, I Want You." The player connected to the server and instantly spawned as a Demolitions character. The player spawned in a fairly dark, disturbing room with one single locker. The player had played a lot on this map and noticed that this section of the map was very unfamiliar. The player stepped out of the room and was greeted with a white empty area, similar to what an out-of-bounds area looks like on other games, just pure white and nothing there at all. The player stepped out and noticed something appearing on the chat box that said, "You are good to go." Upon receiving the message, the player noticed a steel gate in the distance and immediately headed for it and crossed the gate. Upon crossing the gate, the player noticed that all the characters in the game from both teams, all of the different soldiers like the scout and the demolitions and the pyro, were hanging from a roof or something, like they were hung, and their mangled faces looked at the player, with some of their limbs even missing. Every time the player would look at the demo man, the screen would get grainy and an image would slowly fade in. As the image formed the fourth time, it covered the entire screen, and was there for 5 seconds before disappearing again. Now the bodies had disappeared and the player had lost his or her connection to the server. Shortly before disconnecting, the chat box had another message that consisted of one word only: why? The player opened up the server browser and noticed that the server just vanished and wasn't available anymore. The player noticed that there was an update for Team Fortress 2 simply called -fixed immediately after this encounter. The player commenced to play other games that night since he or she couldn't sleep. So from there on now, the player could not properly eat or sleep, and every time the player kept watching Team Fortress 2 videos to help recover, every once in a while, the video would stop and all the characters would stop and stare at the player, without any pupils. Well, what do I think? It's pretty good. Is it real? Sort of. I mean, all the stuff in the creepypasta, such as the characters that had no pupils, could have easily just been a graphical glitch, resulting from obsolete video card drivers and software. I mean, I've had that stuff before too, so it doesn't seem very odd. As far as the hanging bodies and the weird map the player described, I actually do believe it's possible. I don't really play Team Fortress 2, and I mean I've played it and only like 3 matches, and I've never really gotten into it. The only Valve games I really play are Counter-Strike, Left 4 Dead, Left 4 Dead 2, and I know that all of Valve's multiplayer games are very mod-friendly, which means Valve actually encourages players, the modding community, to make maps. So, making a map and hosting your server wouldn't be that difficult. I mean, obviously, I've done it before too with, Counter-Strike. I've downloaded the dedicated server application, run some custom maps. It wasn't that difficult. But, and maybe some sick person actually made a custom map that shows hanging bodies so grotesquely mangled and hosted a server. So it doesn't seem unrealistic at all if a map like this existed. Since, again, anybody can host a server and people can join. It doesn't seem that odd. And the only part that was weird was when the player mentioned the patch. I tried searching if such a patch ever got released, like -fixed, if that was the only thing that was written in the patch notes. And when I was searching, there are over 300 patches released for Team Fortress 2 for the computer, for the PC and Mac alone. Not so much for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, but yes, for the computer, which is what this player was playing on, there are over 300 patches. And obviously I couldn't just dig through each and every one of them. And, Team Fortress 2 is a very large game with a very active multiplayer community. And I suppose if such a patch ever got released, it would sort of gain popularity among gaming media, and people would hear about it, even if they didn't play Team Fortress 2. Finally, the last bit actually really made me laugh, when the player said that every video of Team Fortress 2 that he or she watched, all the characters would stop and stare at the players without any pupils. I don't think that is remotely possible at all. I mean, unless every single Team Fortress video on the internet happens to have a certain part where all the characters stare at you without any pupils. And, I feel as if this part was omitted from the story, like just taken out, it would have been more realistic and creepier. I mean, like, it would have been a more, creepier ending. But overall, it's not realism that counts, since it's just a creepypasta, and it's supposed to be entertaining. And this creepypasta does exactly that, entertain. Overall, this is a creepypasta you should check out. Links in the description, yeah. This is my analysis of Team Fortress 2. And if you like what you saw, then like, comment, and subscribe. This is Some Ordinary Gamers, out.